Berurah class as we continue to discuss the laws of Nesias Kapayim, the laws of raising the hands of the Kohanim, and talking about all the different ways in which we are required to behave and conduct ourselves during this very important mitzvah. But today we're going to start learning about a riddle. Okay, here's a good riddle, because we already talked about when did the Kohanim go out, when did the Kohanim stay in, what if the Kohen is leading the service, what do you do? What do you do when everyone in the shul is a Kohen? Okay, not all these next ones are going to be riddles like this. So we start off with a riddle. What do you do in a case where the whole shul is Kohanim? So the Shulchan Aruch says the following. He says, if the Beit HaKnesset, right, if the Knis, right, as the Sfaradim would say, or if the shul, as amongst the Ashkenazim they would say, where the whole congregation there is Kohanim. If there is exactly 10, okay, right, there's exactly 10, everyone goes to the Duchen, and to whom do they bless, he says? They bless their friends who are in the fields. And who answers after them? The women may answer, and the children. If there's more than 10, meaning if there's more than 10 present, Kohanim, the rest of the 10 will go up, and they will bless, okay? And the remaining 10 will answer Amen. Okay. So when we say Kulam, when we say it's all of them, Mishnah Berurah explains, so everyone goes up. Everyone except for the Shliach Tzibor, who's standing in his place. So he's also a Kohen in this situation. So we already said in Sif Chaf, which we learned about last week, that the Shatz, who is a Kohen, when he's leading the services, and his other Kohanim, he does not do the hand raising. He does not do Nesias Kapayim. Okay, even though he knows that he could go back to the proper place, like he has a sitter, it's marked off, put a little sticker there. He should be the person who recites for them the Yivarechachas and all that, to have them respond. Okay, and that's what we learned earlier. Okay, that was in Mishnah Berurah number 87, in note number 87 of Mishnah Berurah. And because we also said there that if there's no other Jewish person there, meaning there's not a Yisrael or a Levi who could do it, okay, then he himself is mockery. So we say, who are they blessing? Their brethren who are in the fields, right? So Kohanim are just doing the bracha to an empty shul, and the blessing is shooting out everywhere. Now, Mishnah Berurah asks obvious questions. Why is this excluding the women and the children? It's not talking about the women and the children. Okay? Because we're saying that since there's no minion there other than them, of course they're blessing them, but we're saying to other people who were in the house of prayer, who are not there to pray with them, okay, that they're being blessed as well. But we do say the women and the children say Amen. So Mishnah Berurah explains, if there are women and children there, then they'll say Amen. If there's no women and children there, they still do that, but saying Amen is not important. So no one will say Amen in that case. Now there's more than 10. Okay, so why is this rule different? Because the reason is, since there are 10 adults, and they should have people who could stand there and say Amen, that's the better option. Okay? And so therefore, some should go up, and another 10 should answer Amen. So I say that the 10 answers Amen. Okay? So here's something interesting. Even though we originally learned that the halacha is, at the very beginning, that for Nesias Kapayim, you need to have 10, and the Kohanim are considered part of the 10, and you don't have 10 answering, okay, nonetheless, that's still good. So why don't we just do that here, okay? So that case, originally we talked about it, since the blessing of the Kohanim is meant to be distributed to the Jewish people, to the rest of the Jewish people, to Yisrael, right, to Levi and Yisrael, So that's why we do it that way. And that's why even with less than 10 Kohanim, they'll go up and it won't count against the 10 who are there. Okay, and that's why if you had, let's say, 9 Kohanim and 1 Yisrael, so you'll have, if the Yisrael is the one leading davening, right, then all the Kohanim will still go up. And they'll bless this 1 Yisrael, which is not the case where everybody's a Kohen. Okay? They're not going to just put one guy out there like, you'll be receiving the blessing, right? No, because he's supposed to be doing the blessing. That's the mitzvah. Okay? And if there's 10 to be receiving the blessing and say Amen, that's what we would prefer. So we see there's lots of different permutations of this law, depending on how many people are there. So if there is at least 1 Yisrael in there, then everything is normal. But if there's not, you follow this interesting rule. Okay, that was halacha 25. Now we're on halacha 26. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled normal Kohen blessing information. Shulchan Aruch says, when the blessing is being recited by the Kohanim, the people down below should not recite another verse along with it. Instead, they should be quiet and listen to the blessing. Okay? Okay, and the Ramah adds, nonetheless, nowadays, when the Kohanim make very long tunes, the custom is to say certain verses during that time. And we talked about that earlier in Siman Nun Zion, in chapter 57. Okay? We talked about during Baruch Hu, they lengthen Baruch Hu, and there are certain psukim that you say at that time period. However, it's preferable not to do that. So, there's nothing wrong with this custom, he says, but if you're not doing it, there's no reason to start it. Okay? Don't be self-affirming to say everything in the Siddur. So, for example, if you look at an Art Scroll Siddur, there's these verses, they're wrapped around Baruch Hu and in the Art Scroll Siddur. I don't know anybody who says that. So we say that during the blessing of the Kohanim, we don't recite any psukim, because the Mishnah explains it makes no sense that a servant is receiving the blessing from the master and isn't paying attention, right? That would be, kind of insulting to do that. So you're getting a blessing, pay attention. And so we say not to say them. And the Mishnah says, and all later authorities can see that this should be the correct way to do it. The Magen Avraham and the Taz say the following, that if someone does say them while the Shliach Tzibur is calling to the Kohanim, then that's okay. And the Eliyah Rabbah doesn't like that suggestion. Okay? He says, go check out what they have to say. And the Gra was the minhag not to recite them. This is listed in the Ma'aser Rav. And so much the more so that a person should be careful not to say any psukim out loud while I was trying to cite the Berachos Kohanim, because people do this and they're trying to recite the words and you're reciting another verse in and of itself. And especially now where they're trying to recite the words from Yivarecha and so on. And this is an error which is mentioned in no single place. So you're not supposed to sing along with the Kohanim. You're not supposed to chant along with the Kohanim. But some places you can say quietly to yourself, don't interrupt everybody else, and don't disrupt them. Halacha 26. The Kohen may not, on his own volition, add to any of the 3 verses of the Berachos Kohanim. And if he does add a verse, he violates the Torah prohibition known as Bal Tosif. Okay? So this is like adding another tzitzis to your garment, so on and so forth. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah says, the Kohen may not do this. He may not add. Okay, so Lashon of the Gemara, he's going to quote the Gemara now, is that a person should not say, hey, the Torah gives permission to bless. I will add one more blessing that I'm bringing up for myself, right? And what's that blessing? Would it be Hashem, the God of your fathers, shall add to you 1,000 more blessings, right? Things we find like in Ha'azinu, okay, and other places in the Torah, Talmud Lomar, Lo Tosifu. So the Torah says, add nothing. And the Gemara concludes that even if they finish all of the blessings, he still violates his prohibition of Bal Tosif. And how much the more so if he's doing it in the middle of the other verses. Okay? And this is only adding another verse that's prohibited. Okay? However, to say Berachos Kohanim numerous times throughout the day is not. Why? Because I'm doing this mitzvah more than one time. Okay, so I can't add to it. Okay? And also, too, the Mishnah explains, adding another verse is bad and doing only two, also bad. Right? That's Baal Tigra. So you will violate that prohibition. Halacha 28. That was 27? We're in 28 now. Okay, a Kohen that did the Siyas Kapayim somewhere else. And then he goes to a different shul. And he gets there and he finds that they haven't gotten to the Berachos Kohanim yet. He can do Berachos Kohanim again. So that's like adding on to the previous halacha. Okay, so Mishnah explains, what does this mean? So like we just explained, there's no adding on to this mitzvah if you do it two times, because you're doing that's okay. Nonetheless, you have no obligation to go and do Berachos Kohanim at that time, because you already did it one time that day. And we learned that halacha in Sif Gimel, that in number 3, that you don't have to do it one time a day. Okay, and we said earlier in the Mishnah Berurah in note number 11 that even though you're not obligated to do Nesiyas Kapayim, to do the hand raising for the blessing, even though there's no obligation to it, every time you do it, you are going to say the blessing of Asher Kiddishanu Mitzvah Mitzvah, right? That you have commanded us, okay? Because you are doing another mitzvah. Okay, so a Kohen, if he's in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei, if there's no other Kohen in the shul, he should pause his Shemona Esrei and should go up to the Duchan in order that people shouldn't miss out on the mitzvah of the Siyas Kapayim. And then afterwards, he can go back and finish his Shemona Esrei afterwards. And if there's other Kohen there, then he does not need to do that. Okay? Unless he's interrupted and told, go to the Duchan, which we learned earlier, that halacha. Okay? Or go wash your hands. And then even if there are other Kohanim, he has to stop and go up, because now he's been ordered. Now he's been given an explicit order. And nonetheless, when you are pausing in the middle of your Shemona Esrei in order to go up to the Duchan, you have to move your feet, okay, and also when you wash your hands, okay, and also that's when the Shliach Tzibur gets to the Ritzei blessing. But if you don't move your feet, okay, then you don't do the blessing. However, there's an opinion of the Eliyah Rabbah who disagrees with this permissive approach of the Shulchan Aruch. And even if they tell him to go up, even though the prayer is rabbinic, nonetheless, it's entirely possible that the rabbis of the Talmud went ahead and said, hey, we're going to override the mitzvah aseh of doing a Siyas Kapayim for you to finish your Shemona Esrei. And also the Ya'avetz, Rav Yaakov from Enden, Rav Yaakov ben Tzvi, in his Siddur says not to pause in the middle of your prayer to go recite the Berachos Kohanim. Okay? Even if you are in another blessing, unless you have gotten to the place where Berachos Kohanim normally is. And then he suggests that it will be permitted to move your feet and to go up on the Duchan in order to go and give the Berachos Kohanim in that place. As again, going up the Duchan is going up in front of the Aron, turning your back to the Aron, and then facing the congregation. Okay, because that's not considered a pause, because it's part of the blessing of the final blessing of Sim Shalom. Okay, so if you're in the middle of your prayer service, the Mishnah Berurah adds, and you get to a place where you know that it's going to be similar to where the Shliach Tzibur is, and you know that you're going to have to get up and go to do the Berachos Kohanim, okay? So therefore, you should therefore angle yourself in such a way that you can go ahead and get up to the Duchan in that fashion. Okay, and that's at the blessing of Ritzei, which is the one prior to Berachos Kohanim. And this will only work if you're sure that you won't forget what blessing you're at, okay, and ruin the rest of your prayer. Nonetheless, it's not permitted to go ahead and pause in the middle of prayers, and that's what he has to say on the matter. Okay, so interesting halacha. Okay, 29. A Kohen that has not yet prayed, and he finds that the tzibur is currently repeating the Shemona Esrei, then he should go up and do Nesiyas Kapayim, and the prayer shouldn't stop him from doing that. Okay, I guess this means his obligation. So what's the speed? So the Mishnah explains that if he sees that when he goes up to the Duchan that he's going to miss out the time for prayer, well, then he should leave and go daven. Okay, but if they already said to him, go do the prayer service, right? Go wash your hands, and he's going to violate Torah prohibition, and that's going to override the rabbinic prohibition. And if he hasn't recited the Shema, you're going to have a similar problem as well. Okay, so it says that if you haven't recited the Shema, and you see that by going up to do Berurah Kohanim, you're going to miss out on time of your Shema, then you should run outside again and recite the Shema. However, if they told you to get up there, they need to go up and recite Berurah Kohanim. Okay, so that's sort of a common issue. Way to resolve it. Okay, 30. Okay, so here's some of the rules that are relate to a Kohen that should not go up to raise his hands. I think we'll finish with this one today. It's rather long. I think this will be the last one we do for class today. So they say someone who has a blemish on their face or on their hands. So, for example, if they have blisters or cavities all along their face, okay, so or some type of other blemish. So the Ramah adds the following. So the first type of expansive thing is like a white splotch, okay? And so other people explain them as things that sort of like bend, like they bend slightly in one direction, like the skin folds upon itself in another direction. Okay, and then there's three types, so, and then the third one, okay, which is also which is called bent over. This one means that it's his fingers are bent backwards, or his fingers he can't separate them properly. Okay, so most of these things are things that are on his face or on his hands. Okay, so just the different types of splotches, or it means that his fingers don't work properly. Okay, so we'll talk about more of these in more depth in a second. That person may not do the Siyas Kapayim. He cannot do raising the hands, because people are going to be looking at the weird stuff on his face and his hands, okay? Same thing, too, if a person has weird blemishes upon his feet, when people see them when he goes up to the Duchan, right? He'll be standing up elevated for most people when you go up there. Okay, and you're not going to be wearing any socks or shoes. And also, someone who has their spittle dribbling down along their beard, okay? So that's another problem. Another problem is, the next problem is that the what's it called? The tears are streaming down his eyes. And so too, someone who is blind in one eye may also not raise his hands to bless the congregation. Okay, now if this person is normally in the city and they see people like this or see him all the time, they recognize him, so even though you have these different blemishes, then you can go ahead and do the Siyas Kapayim. And any person who has been in the city more than 30 days is considered someone who's commonly in the city, and therefore these blemishes no longer are distracting. But if he's kind of visits the city, temporarily, it's just like he's just visiting or he's a tourist, you know, just go ahead and tell everybody you're a tourist. They'll believe you. But he's been there for 30 days, okay? That doesn't count, okay? And even if he hasn't come to live there to be a member of the city, like he hasn't moved there, okay? He's just coming to be there for an extended period of time. Maybe he's got a job, whatever, okay? Or he's there because he's a sofer, maybe he's working on Sefer Torah. Or he's an annual servant, okay? Or he's a half a year servant. That's considered having lived in the city for 30 days. Okay, so the question is what kind of marks and defects are distracting, what or not? Okay, so where are these different defects? So the first one is the bohaki nuns. Those are the first one we talk about, which are the splotches. Okay, and so the Mishnah says this is talking about on your face, and you have these splotches all over the place. Okay, it's speckled everywhere. And they're not small. They're not big. They can be rather small as long as they're all over the place. And the people who are freckles, he says, these are called Zumra Spreckelin. Okay, those are freckles. So if the heavily freckled people are there all the time, then that person can do it. All right. So that's sometimes having the Yiddish in there is kind of helpful. Okay, it's funny. It's called Zuma sprinkling because it's a summer time. Some people only used to get that skin condition in the summertime. Okay, so why is it that this is distracting? So Mishnah says because it's so different, and that's why people will look at it because they're gonna be like, what is that? Okay, so and he says so. I just translated it, but he brings up over here that the socks that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about are different than the socks that we have, but it's the same idea. You're going up barefoot basically. Some people go up in socks. Okay. Now, if that person is commonly living there, so let's talk about this. So the reason why a blemish ruins the opportunity for a Kohen to do the blessing on his face or hands and feet and all types of different things is because people are going to stare at it. Now, if a person is normally around there, you're not going to stare at it so much because you're used to seeing it. But if it's something that's new, then you're going to be distracted. So in the Talmud itself, it talks about that a person who is a pocheach, okay? So we learned about that earlier. A person who has shredded clothing also can't do it, okay? So that's if your clothing is shredded. Well, that we learned already back in chapter 53, verse 13, or halacha 13. So go review the class up there. The Pri Chadash says that a person who is feeling ill in the stomach, right, that they've been having loose bowels all day, okay, they also shouldn't do it, okay, and not only should not do it, they should also leave before they start with say. Another thing that we said was that if a person's only visiting there temporarily, because people aren't used to seeing a person looks like that doing the Siyas Kapayim, and so they're going to be distracted by the different things. And the last thing he brings in is that since nonetheless, if a person lives there for a little while, and we see him doing the Siyas Kapayim, then that's considered common. Okay, having a couple minutes over here. Yeah, we do. So let's look at a quick biur halacha. Let's see. We don't have time to do all of them because this class is generally on the Mishnah Berurah. We don't have time to do a biur halacha, but I want to look at one really quickly over here. Which one? Okay, so the one of the issues that we have is looking for different things that are when we say that we're looking for different things that are distracting. So the question is, do you have to leave the shul or not? So not everyone is so sure if that's necessarily the case. Okay, so if people recognize them and are commonly familiar with their various blemish, then they don't need to leave the shul, like we just said. but a lot of people feel that they should, because not everybody knows the halacha is, and they may not know a reason why they're not going up. So if they know they're a kohen, then they're not going up. That's going to be a problem. So therefore, they should leave, because they can still get an aliyah for the Torah, but they should leave the shul during Ritzeh. So that way, people won't go, oh, well, why is he standing here and not going up there? And then they may not be familiar enough with it. So that's what he adds. That's one thing that he adds from the Biur Halacha, and we'll hold it with that today. So just an interesting little tidbit added from the Biur Halacha. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you